Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com for NFL picks. Right now, today is October the 10th, 2015. It's 11:35 a.m. West Coast time in the United States, the Pacific time zone. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, there are a few lines out there right now, and again, it's October the 10th, 2015, that I don't understand, right? That you, the boxing public, are on the other side of the play from where I am, right? These bets, to me, offer compelling value, right? I think the boxing cognoscente might have these lines wrong. Right? Let me just go through them, then we'll talk about DeGale against Lucian Bute. The first such line is the crazy line in the Timothy Bradley-Brandon Rios fight. Right? Now, I don't know who wins the fight. I view this fight as really a close call. Bradley's had problems with hardcore front foot guys, hasn't he? Right? Ruslan Provodnikov. Wasn't that fight a tough fight for Timothy Bradley? Right? Bradley really does better, doesn't he, against guys who can't match his foot speed, guys he can just move away from and stay away from. Plus, you have the added uncertainty of Bradley having a new trainer. I don't care who the trainer is, right? It could be Ray Arcel or it could be Angelo Dundee. In this case, it's Teddy Atlas. I don't care who the trainer is. This is going to be new. Right? There's going to be some uncertainty. Right? This, it's like you know your ex-wife better than you know the girl you just met last night. Maybe your ex-wife gets on your nerves, but you know what she means when she's talking to you after you've been hit upside the head. Right? Here, I'm not sure if Timothy Bradley's going to have that same comfort level with his new trainer, Teddy Atlas. So, Bradley right now is a 1-4. That's crazy to me. I'm using British odds because I'm getting these odds off oddschecker.com/boxing. Again, that's oddschecker.com/boxing. You're getting better than 3-1 odds on Brandon Rios, who is going to be coming forward. Do you really think Timothy Bradley is going to be able to duplicate what Manny Pacquiao, a southpaw, did to Brandon Rios? I don't. Right? I think Brandon Rios is the value play there. Again, I don't know who's going to win the fight. Let's just say it's a close call. That fight really should be a 50-50 fight. If you're going to give me 3-1 odds on Brandon Rios, I'll take them, especially given Rios' chin. Right? I know I can hedge the play by just taking Timothy Bradley by decision because if Jesse Vargas went the distance against Timothy Bradley, he's not knocking out Brandon Rios. Right? So, Brandon Rios, get a taste of the greater than 3-1 odds. Brandon Rios simply to win the fight. Hedged with Timothy Bradley by decision at these odds. Let's talk about another fight that I can't figure out. Understand, I'm one of those people who believes that Miguel Cotto beats Canelo. Right? I'm not trying to get exotic here. I just feel that Cotto's the better fighter. You're going to give me better than 2-1 odds on Miguel Cotto? What am I missing? Isn't Cotto the guy who, is the middleweight champion? Isn't Cotto the guy who, has been knocking out guys like Daniel Geale and Sergio Martinez? Just in terms of who moves around the ring better, what's the Canelo fight? And I'm serious about this. Educate me, please. Educate all of us in the comment section to this video. What's the Canelo fight where he moves around the ring as well as Cotto moved around the ring against Delvin Rodriguez? You tell me. I hope people are not confusing Miguel Cotto with James Kirkland, who, is right in front of you. Cotto's going to be hard to find. So here, the casino's giving me better than 2-1 odds on Miguel Cotto. right? The bet here that makes itself is Miguel Cotto simply to win the fight. You're getting better than 2-1 odds. Hedged with Saul Alvarez by KO. Is there anyone watching this video who believes that Saul Alvarez, who has a problem fighting 3 minutes of every round, is gonna beat Miguel Cotto by decision? I don't. You gotta be kidding me. Let me talk about another fight where I think the underdog at the casino wins the fight outright. Now, I'll agree, this fight has big risk. It's the heavyweight title fight between Vladimir Klitschko, who's a 1-4 favorite, against Tyson Fury, who you're getting 4.7-1 odds on. Think about that. Now, my point's simply this. If a boxing match breaks out, can't we agree that Vladimir Klitschko loses his title? Is there anyone watching this video who thinks Vladimir Klitschko is going to outbox Tyson Fury? Right, Tyson Fury is better on the outside, folks. Tyson Fury's better on the inside. Now, I'll agree. Tyson Fury got dropped by Steve Cunningham. Okay. Right, we've seen Klitschko opponents hit the canvas and look bad. Folks, when I'm getting almost 5-1 odds on Tyson Fury just to win the fight, I can hedge the play with Klitschko by KO, can't I? Because I'm getting huge leverage on the Tyson Fury side. This is another one of those fights where sign me up for the underdog simply to win. Hedged with the favorite by KO. Let's talk about another fight. Danny Jacobs, boxer, puncher, against puncher Peter Quillin. You're telling me Peter Quillin's the favorite in this fight? Folks, Peter Quillin's going to have to catch up to Danny Jacobs to beat him. If Danny Jacobs wants, he can just float around the ring, stay outside, right? Force the big guy to try to find him. You know, Peter Jacobs has such a hard time moving that he drops Andy Lee twice early in their fight. He couldn't even catch up to Andy Lee. Right now you're telling me he's supposed to catch up to Danny Jacobs? Now here again, this fight's tough, right? It's a tough call. But doesn't the bet make itself when Danny Jacobs, who I would have favored to win this fight, is the underdog at 8-5? Can I just take Danny Jacobs to win the fight and hedge the play with Quillin by KO? Here again, and I know the fight's in Brooklyn, I just don't see how Danny Jacobs loses a decision. All right, well, now that I've firmly convinced you that I disagree with the boxing public and am a loon out there who likes a lot of underdogs this fall, right? Let me talk about a favorite I like. And that's James DeGale against Lucian Bute. Now let me say this. You know, it's my belief that the biggest fights out there don't become apparent until after they happen. I'm just telling you one of the biggest fights of the last 10 years. It's going to have Hall of Fame repercussions. Is the fight that took place between Lucian Bute, then unbeaten, and Carl Froch. Right? I'm telling you now, while I consider Froch's best display of boxing to have been the rematch against Miguel Kessler, I thought you saw Froch in all of his glory, right? The jabs working. He's, methodically breaking down Kessler. I thought Froch looked great in that fight. But I'm telling you, when the Froch story is written, one of the fights that's going to be in the first paragraph is his destruction of Lucian Bute. We forget how big Bute was. Look at the Bute resume. He was champ for a long time. He beat a lot of names. Right? If Bute beats Froch in the UK, Bute would be an obvious Hall of Famer. Instead, Bute got destroyed by Froch. Right? This has lifted Froch to the point where, let's face it, we all know Carl Froch is a Hall of Famer. Right? Froch doesn't have to fight anybody else. He doesn't have to do anything else at this point. Right? That Bute destruction is really compelling footage. Right? Keep in mind, in that fight, I believe Froch was the underdog. It's a crowning moment in Froch's career. Let me say, not only did it tarnish the Bute legacy, and if I'm a retired boxer thinking of coming back, right, if I'm Floyd Mayweather, for example, I need to look at what happened to Bute. If I'm Manny Pacquiao, I need to look at what happened to Bute's legacy. If I'm Juan Manuel Marquez, I need to look what happened to Bute's legacy. Right? He got cobra'd. Folks, let me say this. I don't think Bute today is who he was entering the ring to fight Carl Froch. I view that Bute-Carl Froch fight like I view the rematch of Roy Jones against Antonio Tarver. Jones enters the ring as Superman. He leaves the ring broken and has never been the same. Right? I don't believe Bute is the same fighter today that he once was. Understand, it's a long fall. I picked Bute against Carl Froch. I'm here telling you as someone who loved Bute. Right? Thought Bute was an excellent fighter. That boxing's a brutal sport. He's not the same fighter. Understand, Bute fights Jean Pascal. He gets methodically outboxed by Jean Pascal. His reflexes don't look the same to me. A lot of boxing is subtle. There's a moment in the Carl Froch fight where Bute gets hit, and it looks like his legs are gone. And I mean gone. He's up against the ropes. Doesn't look like he could get off the ropes. Right now we see sports where a guy gets hurt, gets a knee injury, and is never quite the same. Right? You see it in sports. Guys with injuries who they come back, but they don't quite have the burst that they once did. Right? In baseball, it's a brutal sport. You see pitchers with arm problems where the gun just doesn't hit the same miles per hour on the fastball that it did before the injury. Now, I believe in boxing you have brain injury, where guys like in history, Jerry Quarry destroys Ernie Shavers, then has tough fights later where you look at Jerry Quarry and you understand Jerry Quarry wouldn't come close to beating the version of himself who destroyed Ernie Shavers. I believe this Lucian Bute wouldn't come close to beating the Lucian Bute who entered the ring against Carl Froch. Now let's talk about James DeGale. You know, James DeGale is a rare athlete. To me, he reminds me of Jason Kidd, the basketball player. I was watching Jason Kidd and I thought, you know, this guy can't shoot. Right? He was such a bad shooter, they started calling him Asen because he didn't have a J. Right? Didn't have a jumper. Right? I looked at Kidd and I thought, man, you know, this guy really can't jump. Jason Kidd wasn't a jumper. Right? But as you watch Jason Kidd play, you understood that there was a mental part to his game, an approach to his game that made him one of the best basketball players I have ever seen. If you asked me which players I've come across who add the most wins to their team, Jason Kidd is on the very short list. Understand, Jason Kidd led one of the worst NBA Finals teams in history, the New Jersey Nets, to the NBA Finals twice. Right? Then he picks up the title with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, when you look at James DeGale, he doesn't have the best jab I've seen. Far from it. Right? Let me compare and contrast for a moment James DeGale with Victor Postal. I can look at Victor Postal and say, hey, I like that jab. Right? That jab's kind of like a 2x4. Right? I see Victor Postal's legs. He's moving around the ring, and I say, wow, this guy moves well. I look at Victor Postal's hand speed. He's busting off combinations. And I say, oh, man, this guy's a combination puncher. Oh, he's fluid. He has hand speed. Now, I look at James DeGale. It's a different game. Right? I believe many boxers, many would-be opponents, look at James DeGale. I believe trainers look at James DeGale and they say, you got to be kidding. We could beat this guy. Right? This guy, figuratively speaking, doesn't have a jumper. You know, I'm just telling you, I've looked at my share of boxing like all of us. In the sport of boxing in 2015, there is no one better in the pocket. There simply is no one better in the pocket. I'm just here to tell you that this is a guy who is so masterful. He has gifts you can't teach. I look at Tyson Fury. I look at Terrence Crawford. I look at Andre Durrell. And, you know, these guys will switch between righty and lefty. And I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, this is interesting. So Terrence Crawford was righty, now he's lefty, and I say, okay, this is his left-hand game. Understand, nobody switches like James DeGale. He has a different center of gravity. He gets in a crouch, and it's not a, hey, I'm righty, hey, I'm lefty, look at me. No, it's more of a opening base switch. He's beating you up southpaw. He sees an opening. He pivots on his feet. You can't read his legs. Suddenly, he's fighting out of a right-hand stance in the middle of the combination. Right? He got beat by George Groves. George Groves is moving out of the pocket. He's staying away from what Groves' trainer, Adam Booth, who Groves should never have left, called DeGale's blender. Right? Booth knows how dangerous DeGale is in the pocket. Right? DeGale has now added a back foot game. Right? You want to see a masterpiece, look at DeGale's fight against Davis. You want to compare and contrast different approaches against the same fighter. Look at the man who Carl Froch calls the best in boxing pound for pound today. Andre Ward against Paul Smith. I want you to compare and contrast that to James DeGale against Paul Smith. Right? I'm just telling you that DeGale is a different level. A lot of guys can alter their punches somewhat. No one can change the angle of their punches like James DeGale. As you look at a DeGale fight, understand it's like watching Jason Kidd. Right? He's not flashy like Victor Postal. Right? When you look at DeGale, you're not thinking Jordan. You're not thinking Kobe. Right? You're thinking more Kareem. Right? It's a different game. DeGale, in my opinion, would beat Carl Froch. Right? I believe DeGale is going to fight Bute, who's a southpaw. And understand, I think Bute thinks he can fight a George Groves fight. Stay outside. pop a jab. Use length, ring savvy. He's never lost in Quebec, folks. Right? Have the crowd behind him. Right? I think Bute thinks he can, on his back foot, pop a jab, outmaneuver, out-hand speed James DeGale. I believe what he's going to find is that DeGale's going to be able to methodically cut off the ring against him. I think what he'll find is he has nowhere to go. Right? I believe Bute is going to get beaten worse than he was beaten by Jean Pascal. Right? I think DeGale is looking and thinking stoppage. Right? DeGale right now is a big favorite in the fight. Understand, Carl Froch beat Bute in the United Kingdom. Bute crossed the Atlantic to fight Carl Froch. You're going to see an Englishman cross the Atlantic to go to Canada. Then you're going to see him deconstruct one of Canada's favorite fighters. Right? I think DeGale will be able to literally hunt down Lucian Bute. Right? There's a possibility that this ends as ugly as Carl Froch's win did against Lucian Bute. Right? I like James DeGale in this fight. I believe this fighter is much better than advertised. I think his decision to go to Canada to fight Lucian Bute is genius. Because I believe if DeGale wanted, he could fight Adonis Stevenson and take his light heavyweight title. Right? I believe Canada is one of the best places for a fighter right now. You have several world-class fighters in Canada. Right? Jean Pascal. I know Sergei Kovalev is not from Canada, nor is Bute. But the people in Canada know Sergei Kovalev. Right? Artur Beterbiev has been fighting a lot out of Canada. Right? James DeGale, simply put, could declare war on the country. If he beats Bute, they'll know him in Canada. That's going to set up a lot of big-time future fights before sellout crowds in one of the most passionate boxing hotbeds in the industry. Right? DeGale is getting 1.5 million pounds for this fight against Lucian Bute. I'm telling you, the sky is the limit, because most people really don't know that much about DeGale. They know Adonis Stevenson. They know Jean Pascal. Could you imagine a guy going into that country and dismantling systematically some of Canada's biggest names? I'm telling you, this guy has that level of talent. It's my belief that Carl Froch retired at the right time. Right? He was able to retire saying, look, I beat Bute, I beat George Groves twice. Right? Why should I fight James DeGale when I've beaten the guys from my era? I think he got out at the right time, because I think DeGale right now is a tsunami. Right? I would not hesitate to take James DeGale over Gennady Golovkin. I think DeGale is that good. Revisit the Andre Dirrell fight. I know many of you here online in the post-fight video, in the comment section, said, hey, if DeGale doesn't win that last round, I would have had Dirrell winning the fight. This was a razor-close fight. I'm telling you, if you relook at that fight, if you rewatch it, I believe DeGale knew he had the fight. This is like Jeff Gordon with a several-lap lead in a race. Right? Deciding, okay, I'm going to play it safe. I'm not going to go as fast as I can. I'm just going to finish this race with the win. I believe if the two guys fight again, DeGale might step on the gas, right? He has the title win now. Understand that fight was in America. Understand what DeGale's doing. He's taking a world tour and beating guys in their country. Right? As it was. In fact, if you go back to the knockdown in the Durrell fight, the first one, right? I think DeGale is setting up that punch in the moments before that knockdown, right? Because I think DeGale, put it this way, no one reads an opponent faster in boxing than James DeGale, right? It's very hard to describe guys who do it on technique and savvy rather than foot speed and hand speed, right? You can look at a Manny Pacquiao fight, the hand speed slaps you in the face, right? You say, my God, this guy is fast, right? It's much harder to look at a fighter like a James DeGale. Look at that ugly looking jab. Look at the awkwardness with which he moves around the ring and understand what the guy is doing, right? This fighter could be great. I believe he's going to make his case against Lucian Bute. I like him in that fight. But let me say this. You know, Ali famously went to San Diego. He was walking through the gym, watching Ken Norton's workout. The press was with him. And Ali famously said, look at him. He fights like an amateur, right? Ken Norton, of course, while fighters fight like this, Ken Norton had an Archie Moore defensive stance, right? Ken Norton was flat-footed, didn't dance around the ring. He looked awkward. When the two guys fought, Ken Norton broke Ali's jaw, beat up Ali, gave Ali one of the worst beatings of his career. Right? It was then that Ali understood why Joe Frazier, who had sparred with Ken Norton, didn't want to fight Kenny. But understand, when you're as unorthodox as Ken Norton is, or as James DeGale is, right? When you're changing feet and, changing punches on the fly and trying to adjust your defense on the fly, understand there are going to be car crashes. James DeGale is high risk. Right? When you watch him, sometimes he, is changing from righty to lefty mid-combination. That creates openings for an opponent. I believe there will be a day when someone catches DeGale unprepared. When DeGale gets hit, badly hurt, and can't hold on. The hedge I'm recommending is going to be controversial against Lucian Bute in Canada. But the hedge I'm recommending is DeGale to win the fight. If you have to hedge it, I would hedge it with Bute by KO. Right? What that means is if the fight goes to a decision in Canada against one of Canada's boxing heroes, I'm expecting the champ, DeGale, to get the decision. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I know many of you are going to say Bute by decision. Fair enough, right? I believe by the end of this fight, Bute is going to be more beat up than he was in the Libredo-Andrade fight, right? Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for us on any of the fights I've mentioned. Thanks for stopping by.